Welcome to Arkansas Wildlife. It's springtime in Arkansas and that means fishing, and this week we've got a largemouth bass extravaganza lined up for you. We're headed over to Hot Springs to the Hulsey State Fish Hatchery to see how the Game and Fish Commission uses an innovative approach to propagate Florida strain largemouth bass. And a little later in the show, we're headed to one of the many irrigation reservoirs that dot the eastern third of the state. They not only provide water for row crop agriculture, they also offer some outstanding fishing for largemouth bass. But first up this week, we're headed up to Lake Atkins, a well-known producer of big Florida strain largemouth bass, to see if we can hook up with one of those lunkers. All that and this week's winner of a hunting and fishing license right after this break. Arkansas Wildlife is brought to you in part by Academy Sports and Outdoors. For all, for less. We're setting out on Lake Atkins on a warm spring morning. Lake Atkins is an Arkansas game and fish owned lake just south of Atkins, and it's quickly developing a reputation for producing trophy largemouth bass. It didn't take us long to find out why. About 30 minutes to be exact.
Come over that log. And that one.
Yes, sir.
There we go. Number one. Look at that. Tell me he didn't like that frog. Nice Atkins largemouth with likely some Florida bass genes.
Lake Atkins isn't a very big lake, just less than 1,000 acres total, and it presents some unique challenges for anglers in search of its trophy bass.
We're throwing this is actually a spro, but a hollow-bodied plastic frog, and throwing it as far back under these cypress trees as you can. Of course, they're leafed out, it's green right now, so you gotta get under there, skip it under sometimes, and just get it as far back as you can, because these fish are laying back there. It's shaded, a lot of overhead cover, a lot of protection, a lot of stuff in the water to cover for them. This is a prime example of what I'm talking about. I can't even see my bait when it gets back up in there, and you end up doing a little bit of backlash and trying to skip this 50-pound braid. But I can't even see the bait. Well, I kind of got to peek through the trees to see it sometimes. But this braid is critical to the equation as well. Saw with that one fish, I mean, you got to pull him over multiple cypress knees and logs and bushes, and it doesn't, it's not just pulling it smooth through the water at all. Felt like fishing fly line. Lake Atkins is less than 1,000 acres, so it doesn't get like a lot of bass tournaments and things like that. You can't run boats out here like you can on our big core lakes, but if you want a chance to catch a truly, trophy fish, it's one of the best places in Arkansas to go right now. Part of the reason the lake produces such big bass is because we essentially got a new start with it. Game and Fish came in, killed out all the rough fish, refilled the lake, put some habitat in here, some brush piles and things like that, and then restocked it with sport fish and restocked it with 100% Florida strain largemouth bass. This is about as far north as you'll find Florida strain bass. Now it's not pure Florida strain anymore. I mean, people put fish in here. You've got some feeder creeks, and so you've got northern and Florida hybrids, but there's still strong Florida genes in the gene pool of the largemouth here. And this lake, I mean, year after year produces, 10, 11, 12-pound fish.
The question remained, would we be able to catch one of these big bass? After 4 hours throwing the frog, it was time for a change.
I've been throwing that frog all day, and Scotty in the back of the boat's been trying some different stuff, but man, besides that one fish this morning, really not much. So I'm gonna try some drop baits now. I've been throwing a Cinco a little bit and try this red shad zoom brush hog, see what we can do with it. Yeah, it's a good one. If this is a bass, it's huge. It's got to be a catfish. Oh my God. Oh my God, this may be the biggest bass I've ever caught. Oh, come here, come here, come here. Oh, woo, woo. That is what Lake Atkins is all about right there. Oh my God. Oh, oh my God. Oh, I kind of thought it was a catfish because he is a giant. Wow, that is a pig. I'm gonna let it get a drink of water. Where's the scale? Oh, here's a little seat. 6.85, almost 7. Wow, look at that. Yeah. Man, that was incredible. So I threw in on that dock, just off the dock on that brush pile, like my first or second cast there, pitched in there, and I went to lift up to try to, fill my weight, and there was nothing there. And I looked, and the line was just swimming off. It had gone 15 feet, so I set the hook, and man, I was sure that was a catfish at first because the fish got me underneath the boat, and I couldn't get him up, and oh man, that's why you do this, for fish like that.
That's the great thing about fishing. You can be having a slow day that looks like a bust, and then, in an instant, hook into a fish that creates a lifetime memory and a great fishing story. You never know what can happen on that next cast. By the way, we tested our scale against a certified scale back at the office, and it was weighing a little light. Taking that into account, the fish turned out to be 7 pounds, 2 ounces. After a catch like that, the only thing left to do is hit the Lucky Landing bait shop for one of their famous cheeseburgers to close out the day. Arkansas Wildlife is brought to you in part by Arkansas's own PK Grills, maker of the new PK 360, the best and last grill you'll ever buy. For the avid bass fisherman, there's nothing quite like catching a trophy largemouth. But some of the big bass swimming in Arkansas waters aren't native to the state. Some are actually Florida strain largemouth bass, and the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission breeds them at the Andrew Hulsey State Fish Hatchery near Hot Springs, using a technique called mat spawning.
We've been raising Florida bass here since the early 90s. Historically, we've wild spawned the Florida bass in our ponds where we just paired them up and let nature take its course. It works really well. However, in the last 9 years, we've been trying out new methods of spawning, and we've developed what we call a caged raceway or caged mat spawning technique that's exclusive here at our hatchery. Other hatcheries across the states use raceways to mat spawn bass in. Unfortunately, we don't have a raceway, so what we've done is we created an elongated cage inside the pond on a concrete pad where we will mat spawn our Florida bass. And the last 5 years, it's been working really well. The first Florida brood here at Andrew Hulsey came from Florida. And I think a few years later, they got some from Texas. And once we got established and maintained our own Floridas here at the hatchery, then we keep some fingerlings each year back to use as future brood. When these fish reach 2 years old, we actually do genetic testing to ensure that we do have Florida bass that on site, and the ones that come back positive as Floridas, we'll tag those fish with an orange elastomer tag under their dorsal fin, and those are the ones that we use in our fish production.
So what's so special about these Florida strain bass? Well, under the right conditions, these fish grow faster and reach a larger maximum size than our native northern strain largemouth. By stocking Florida bass in suitable lakes, the Game and Fish Commission is trying to increase trophy bass potential for the state's anglers.
When we started doing this 9 years ago, we would take a pair of bass and put them in individual pens and allow them to spawn naturally, and then we would replace those fish with a new fresh pair of bass and a new mat and allow them to spawn. And it did work. The problem being is that some fish wouldn't spawn in the time they were in the cage, and you'd always end up with some left over after the project that never even got the opportunity to spawn. So what's really great about the way we do it now in the dog run or in our spawning cage is that all the fish have the opportunity to spawn. We have those fish segregated in the pond originally, and we'll pull the divider, we'll place the spawning mats in the cage. We place them about every 3 or 4 feet along the cage. The cage measures 150 feet long by 7 feet wide. And then we'll check them daily, and usually when it gets right and we pull that divider, the very next day we're picking up spawns. Once we get them indoors, we bring them in, we treat these eggs with a disinfectant, for fungus and bacterial things like that. And then we will slowly warm the water up to 72 degrees. At 72 degrees, the eggs will hatch in 2 days. And once they hatch out, those fry will fall to the bottom of the vat. Those fry will stay in that vat for about 7 days until they become swim-up fry. When they're first hatched, they have a large yolk sac that keeps them weighted to the bottom, and they're transparent. And as they get older, they'll take on color, and they'll absorb that yolk sac, and they'll swim up to the top of the water column. At that time, we call them swim-up fry, and that's when we'll harvest them to take them to the ponds. Initially, we'll stock these ponds at 100,000 fry per acre, and then, we'll sample them each week to ensure that the fry are growing. The greatest benefit, opposed to wild spawn, is that you don't have a size variance in these fish the way that we're doing it, and so you don't get cannibalism in your pond, and that creates a larger yield or more production in each pond. Another benefit is that, with wild spawning, you're looking to create 1 million, fingerlings for a production year. You're looking at using, 32 acres of pond space and 600 to 800 broodfish to get that. And so with mat spawning, it's a benefit because we're using 130 fish and probably 18 to 20 acres, and so that allows us more space to raise other things. We will take the crew out. We have long seines, about 150 feet long, and we'll pull those seines, drain the ponds down, pull the seines through the pond, and actually net those fish up in the seine, and then we are able to grab them out, carry them, put them in buckets, and put them onto the transport truck.
After these fingerling bass are loaded, it's off to stock them in Arkansas lakes that are conducive to Florida bass survival. One of those lakes is Lake Atkins, where these fish have been thriving for more than a decade. Arkansas Wildlife is brought to you in part by Zimmerman Sports Center on South University in Little Rock. The eastern third of Arkansas is home to large-scale agriculture, and one of the most vital components of agriculture is water. That means small irrigation reservoirs can be found throughout the Delta, and while they're vital to the state's agriculture industry, they provide a nice side benefit. These irrigation reservoirs harbor many species of fish, but they're probably best known for producing big largemouth bass. We traveled to a small reservoir near Carlisle in search of some big bass with old friends Matt and Mark Hedrick and tournament bass pro Quincy Houchin. Our goal? Catch some big fish on topwater baits.
Hit it as soon as he hit the water. Yeah. A little bit of action.
That's a good one right here.
The soft plastic bite wasn't bad either. These reservoirs produce big fish because of the fertile delta soil that lies beneath them. Big fish are common, and it's not unusual to have days when you catch scores of fish. They're great places to visit to try out new lures and techniques because you're almost guaranteed to catch fish. Arkansas Wildlife presents the Watch and Win Giveaway. During each episode of Arkansas Wildlife, we'll give away an Arkansas resident hunting and fishing license. At the end of this season, we'll be giving away $500 worth of fishing gear with everything you need for outdoor adventures on Arkansas lakes and streams. It's all provided by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Visit the Arkansas Wildlife webpage at arkansaswildlife.com and click on the Watch and Win icon to enter. This week's winner is Paul Goodwin from Mountain View. Congratulations and thanks for watching.